Hi, this is Derri, and I've read it before. Today you will notice there is more than me here. That's because the very lovely Evie has graciously agreed to join me to talk about the Farseer trilogy. And I will have all of Evie's details linked in the description because the lovely Evie, who is now going to introduce herself, is well worth subbing to. So, there you go, Evie.
I'm Evie. There you go.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding. I read a little bit of everything. I don't really do the booktube staple stuff because I'm like, you know what? It stresses me out doing having to do a wrap up and TBRs and doing all that regular stuff. So I'm like, I'll just post whatever I feel like whenever I feel like it. So if you want very inconsistent content, I'm your gal.
The content is always worth watching, though. I will definitely give you that. And for anyone in the booktube world, Evie can be found, much like myself, on various Discords of various YouTube channel people. So if you are in a Discord, keep an eye out for either one of us. We will likely be in a Hob channel. So, which is why we're here today. We're going to be talking about Farseer specifically, and we're going to, this will be news to Evie because I only thought about it last night. This will be not so much a open to all spoilers thing, but I do believe it's likely to be a completely out of context thing where it will be probably full of spoilers that will mean nothing to anybody until you've read it. So feel free to watch.
And if there's outright spoilers, we'll definitely be like, neon sign, don't look.
I even have an idea in mind as to how I'm going to do that when I edit so that people can just skip through and be able to skip the bits that I think are genuinely spoilery. Because, I want people to watch this and think, yes, I want to read these books. Because, Fitz needs all the love he can get.
I was going to say, with that said, haven't you already done a Farseer, why you should read Farseer video?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I mean, you can never have too many reasons and videos on why you should read Farseer.
Absolutely.
But,
yeah. Genuinely out here proselytizing. It's like, yeah, come on, read more Hob, people, because it's well worth your time. Anyway, so I know that you started your Farseer or Hob journey into the Elderlings realm reasonably recently. So can you take us away with sort of where you discovered Hob, how it kind of entered the I should read that state, and what decided you to actually pick it up and go with it, if you would.
Yeah. So I had bought the first trilogy, the Farseer trilogy, because I knew that I wanted to try Robin Hobb because everybody and their brother was reading it. And I was like, you know what? I'm hearing all the buzzwords that I like, but I'm also very nervous because hype can kill anything and everything. And I had no plans to read it other than vaguely 2022. And then Jake Bishop and I, from Jake Bishop, decided to do a swap. He would read Dune Messiah and I would read Assassin's Apprentice. I still am a little bit bitter that he did not like Dune Messiah, but I think I won out in the end.
I think you did.
I mean, it was a win-win. He got me to read Assassin's Apprentice, and I absolutely adored it. I didn't read. I kind of took a break from Hob and her absolute stunning, beautiful prose and heartbreaking plots and characters and just everything. For a while, and I didn't continue the trilogy until I think February of this year, and almost immediately right after finishing Royal Assassin, I was like, I have to totally disregard and throw away my entire TBR, and I need to read Assassin's Quest. So, and now I've since read the Live Ship Traders trilogy. I read that all within a month, which is crazy for me. Yeah, I know, right? And I also read other books in addition to that. I didn't just read that. And I am less than 100 pages from the end of The Golden Fool right now. So
that's exciting. Okay.
But Farseer specific.
We are doing our best to stay within the Farseer trilogy today. And we kind of had a wee kind of brainstorm thing about what are we actually going to talk about, because this, as we both know, could go on for a really long time if we don't limit ourselves. So I figured you had some really great ideas, and I figure if we just sort of pluck two of them out and merge them together, and that we talk about Fitz's relationships with other characters and how that impacts his mental health. Because Farseer is often described, and I don't really get why, but it's often described as quite depressing. As someone with depression, I don't agree with this. But hey, everybody has their own experience when they read books. So I'm not going to say it's not depressing, just that I'd never found it that way. So I thought if we sort of kick-started off with the very first relationship that Fitz forms with Burrich, who is sort of given this child to look after. And sort of how do you feel that relationship initially kind of created his world? I mean, where do you stand with the Fitz-Burrich relationship and how that grew?
Yeah, I mean, if I cut myself off and not include Funny Man so far, I'm gonna try really hard.
Yeah.
It's just a really, they're both, it's what's the movie, it's kind of like 3 Men and a Baby, but with one man. Yes. And one child.
Yeah,
Burrich is really trying to navigate fatherhood with Fitz, and at the same time Fitz is just trying to navigate just being. And Burrich is, whether he knows it or not, is his constant, is that father figure, is that that connection that he really needs, so that he can really find himself in a way, I think.
Yeah, because I mean Burrich's a young man. He's the same age as Fitz's birth father, so that makes him around, I don't know, 26, 27 at the start of the book, when Fitz is maybe 6. Why is this giving you a shocked face? How old did you think Burrich was?
No, it's just, am I finally getting old? And I'm like, oh, 27 is young. So
but it is young.
I know. That's why I'm like, oh, good.
Okay, we'll just take a break.
Fine, I'll
have a
just
moment in our own mortality.
My AARP card, so
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, but I mean, he is a young man, and he has become a father overnight, ultimately, but not of a new baby. And he didn't have 9 months to get used to this idea. He's literally had a 6-year-old arrive and be given to him. Here, have a child. And to make it even more confusing, this child has no memory of anything before arriving at this outpost where he's been handed over to his father's family. So he kind of can't help with, well, this is what I normally do, and these are the things I know. And so you have a child who is in a different culture, is in a different place, is surrounded by strangers, given to a young man who, until this moment, has been living a young man's life. And as we learn through the book, Burrich is an attractive man and has had a life. So this is just such a huge dynamic shift for both of them. And I sort of, that formative time in that first couple of years, you really see them struggling to sort of find that balance. I mean, how did you feel when we started to see Burrich just making mistakes as a dad? I mean, just asking too much of this child. And, how did you feel about how that affected Fitz?
Well, Not necessarily, that's probably answering the question more of just in general, not necessarily how it affected Fitz, but he's treating him, even though he has charge of this child, and I don't think it's really a spoiler that Fitz is the bastard child of his best friend, like whatever. But so Burrich has this weird not dynamic, but like this, I feel like he has a struggle between, I'm not actually this child's father. I knew this child's father. So how do I raise this child? And he feels like the way that he has to raise him is by just putting him to work. He's treating him like, a stable hand. He truly is a stable hand. And it's from the outside, like looking at it from obviously a real life modern perspective, he's not allowing him to be a child. He's working him like almost to the bone. At least that's what Fitz thinks. He's constantly being worked, and he's being told what to do by Burrich and stuff like that. But it's for the world in which Hob creates, it makes sense. It's not totally out there for Burrich to do. And he's doing the best he can with what he has, the tools he has, and the knowledge that he has. He knows the stable. He knows this work that he's doing. So how can he use that to raise this child? Okay, I will put him into the stable. I will get him to work. And that's all I've known. So this is what I'm going to give him.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very much this is what I know. And so long as I'm doing this in line with what his father would be okay with, then I'm good.
Yeah.
I think my next point I'm going to make here is going to be a bit spoilery. So I'll do whatever I end up doing to say this is spoilery, because I want to touch on how Burrich treats the wit when he discovers that Fitz has it. Because obviously at the moment he discovers Fitz's wit, he also discovers who his wit companion is, and his own belief about the wit, which is hugely negative, as we both know, is to end that relationship with the bond companion as quickly as possible. So how did you feel when we have that scene where he separates Nosy from Fitz?
Yeah, I mean, Assassin's Apprentice in Farseer is told in first-person perspective, from Fitz's perspective. And the power of Hobbs' writing and her storytelling and character work is that where people say it's a depressing book, I get that. I understand why they say that. In that, because you are in Fitz's head, you feel everything that he is feeling. And with that disconnect or the cutting of connection between Fitz and Nosy by Burrich, you truly and utterly believe that he killed Nosy. You believe it. Like, there's no doubt in my mind as a reader that Burrich killed Nosy. And it was at that moment that I just had to sit back and I literally sobbed. Like, that is not hyperbolic at all whatsoever. I sobbed. I was almost to the point of hyperventilating. That's how impactful it was.
Yeah, it was. And I was the same. And to be fair, even on all of my rereads, I still bawl like a baby, even knowing how that storyline plays out. I still bawl like a baby. And the power of Hobbs's writing is, as you say, you're so connected to that moment and how Fitz feels. So what I want to sort of say around that situation is, as this little boy who's been given to strangers to look after him, to have a moment where the person who is responsible for his care is capable of killing this puppy that is such a fundamental part of his life, this person who could do that is in charge of him. And I think this is the beginning of where Fitz truly begins to just distrust everybody. Because if the person who cares for him, if the person who is about his well-being can do this to him, what could a stranger do to him? Who could he possibly trust from this point forward?
Yeah, I mean, there's this, up until that point, there's this sense of naivete with Fitz, not as a person, as a character, and with his perception of the world and his connections with everyone from Burrich to Nosy, and that this scene comes relatively, at least for me, it was a gut punch for me as a reader and for Fitz, and it kind of broke that, I don't want to say disillusionment, but it made him grow up almost immediately, I feel like, because he did lose that trust with Burrich, and because he had no connection with anyone else, he has to rely on himself. So while at the same time he loses this trust with Burrich, he has to find him. That's kind of started the journey of Fitz finding himself, which, spoiler alert, he never really does by the end of Farseer. Like, does anyone? Like, no one truly finds. Everyone's in a constant state of improvement and discovery. So
yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, at this point, as Fitz has found the isolation that he will relate to for a long time to come, this is where he begins to have more connection into the court, and we meet some more of the people who are going to define who he becomes. And the next couple of relationships really are the ones with the royals, and that begins with Shrewd, who notices him under the table and claims him, and sort of goes, well, I could ignore him and he could come back and bite the Farseers in the ass later, or we acknowledge him and we bring him into the fold. He makes the choice to bring him into the fold, and that alters that dynamic with the royals. And how do you see that acknowledgement by Shrewd affecting Fitz? Because obviously at this point then he can't be ignored. He can't just be, oh, we don't have to talk about him. He's been acknowledged. I mean, having been brought to the attention of Verity and Regal and the Queen.
Yeah, he's with the acknowledgement, he's kind of, I don't want to say he's at this, not what's the word I'm thinking of? He's kind of at this, not purgatory, but like this impasse, this constant state of suspension of his character and of identity. He's not, if he was not acknowledged, he could continue on life as a stable hand, as a worker, and make a life for himself as a low class person. But by being acknowledged by Shrewd, he can no longer be that, but at the same time, he can never be the same level as the court. So he's kind of at this in between where he's neither one nor the other, and he doesn't get the benefits of either, but gets all the negativity and the cons of both. So it's, and I think that's where people are like, oh, Fitz is depressing. Well, he's kind of suspended. He can't really, with this character that is suspended, and this is one of the reasons why I love Fitz so much, is when people say he's depressing, absolutely, I agree. Excuse me. As someone who's dealt with depression, there is this absolute numbness to his character and to the way he sees the world. And being in this state of like suspension, that exacerbates, whatever the word.
Exacerbates.
Yes, there you go. It just intensifies numbness. And because he has no connections with anyone, from losing that trust with Burrich, and can't truly like be connected to Shrewd or anyone else, he's just, it's a kind of is able to ruminate and just spiral into that numbness and that just literally depressing mentality.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, the isolation that he feels because he's neither fish nor fowl. He's too highborn now that he's acknowledged to be accepted by the lowborn people in the castle, and he's far too lowly born to be accepted into the nobility. And the staff sort of treat him as one of their own, but are also very aware that he's not one of their own. And that isolation gives him nobody to bounce ideas off. He has nothing to rub those edges off his mentality to go, no, dude, it's fine, you're normal. Which you get with a friend circle who can assure you that actually, no, you're not crazy. This is normal. Don't worry about it. And it's, what's the word I'm looking for? It's defining in many ways to who he is as a person. He's withdrawn his trust from anyone after having had that experience earlier, and he's not in a situation to form new bonds to build trust with anybody, which is why I think the next person that he encounters who has a significant impact in his life, Chade, becomes such an integral person to who Fitz is as a person, because he's offered this connection, this secretive connection that he doesn't have to share with anybody else. And I mean, what are your thoughts on Chade and the way that he treats the relationship that he has with Fitz, and what where do you stand with that relationship?
Yeah, well, so Chade is in a similar position to Fitz. I don't think it's a spoiler outside of the Farseer trilogy, but he's a bastard himself. So he has the ability to connect with Fitz in that regard, and giving him this purpose physically, whether intentionally or not, also gives Fitz a purpose mentally. Busy mind, busy, or was it busy body, busy mind, busy body? It goes both ways. And and then that anything that Fitz does that he puts him on benefits his own purposes is a bonus, I think. That's probably the first primary goal in mind. But I think by the end of Farseer, Chade has been connected enough with Fitz to realize what that's doing for him.
Because there is a point in Assassin's Apprentice where Chade does give Fitz an assignment that Fitz doesn't feel able at all to do, and that creates a rift between he and Chade. And again, it feels like Fitz has finally started to trust somebody, and he's had that trust abused. And when we go into Fitz's mental health and we go into the way that he interacts with the world, he's just having this lesson reinforced again, that you have a purpose. If you don't fulfill it, your relationships are taken away. And even those relationships that you form that are special, that are important, are not as important as the jobs that you are being set to do. And so he becomes very reticent to accept connection at all, because his first thought is, what do they want from me?
Well, in addition to that, I mean, I'm probably just projecting here, but if it happens once, okay, question a little bit, but if it keeps happening to you, you start to wonder and start to question and start to worry well, what is it with me? Like,
Yeah.
what did I do? I am the common denominator here. So I must be the problem. So again, probably projecting. But yeah,
I feel the same way.
again, another reason why I love Fitz, because even now, I still have that mentality of, oh God, is it me? Like,
So much so. Yeah. And I mean, all of it stems ultimately from the fact that he was given away as a child, to the point that his own trauma has closed that memory away from himself of what he had before that moment. So this sense of not being wanted, of not being valued enough to keep, to treasure, to be worthy of being part of a family, stays with Fitz, and it impacts every single relationship he has. And we start getting into more emotional connections when we start talking about the women that he encounters as the book progresses, because I have heard it said that there aren't very many women in Farseer, and that's a con in the pros and cons list. My argument to that is it forms his character. It is a choice. This is an authorial choice to not have very many women in Fitz's life. And it does impact the way he interacts with women for the rest of his life within the series. So when he begins to have a relationship with Molly, the candle girl, there's still this reticence to give of himself. He cares for her quite deeply. He thinks that she's just marvelous, like all teenagers do when they encounter somebody that sparks that flame, but he just isn't willing to be vulnerable and be completely open and honest with her. And
she's also she's also just she is something, not in the objectification of the word, but she is something that is just his.
Yeah.
It's not Chade's, not Burrich's. They don't even know about her, allegedly. And he feels like their relationship is valuable, and that she values him just as a new boy. Is it new boy? Yeah, new boy. And he really clings to her for that.
Yeah, he really does. We see, as I don't know if very many men pick up on this when they read Farseer, but we as women, we can look at it and see the charm in him, and why Molly is, even though she's older than Fitz, feels important when she's around him. And his ability to interact with people due to his training with Chade, I think, covers a lot of his mental isolation, because he does interact really well with people. We see him interact with the cook. They've got quite a good friendship, he and the cook. She doesn't really know him because he's just not open. But what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that
I think because because of the training that Chade gives him, again, probably projecting here, Fitz has this ability to observe what's going on around him, what people are doing, what people are saying, how they're interacting with other people, modify his own personality and his character to fit whatever this person wants. And while he is able to be himself as a new boy with Molly, he realizes by observing her that this is the type of person he should be because of the other boys that she's with. And with the cook, like, no one knows him, but he's able to get to know everyone else and be whatever everybody else needs or wants or expects.
Yeah.
And that kind of bites him in the butt too, where like he thinks person A wants or needs this thing, and then he realizes that, oh crap, no.
No, that was a bad decision. And that's a theme. Bad decisions are a theme, very definitely. But there are some really lovely relationships too, and we're heading into my favourites when I say that when Patience arrives at Buckkeep. So, for context, Patience is sort of his stepmother, and when his father dies, she returns to court. So, I find this relationship to be incredibly poignant because they both are looking for something from each other. And it's kind of the same thing. Fitz really kind of wants to have a mother figure in his life. And Patience really kind of wants to claim him as her son, and to quite a significant degree just kind of does. But their interactions are very stilted. The awkwardness in it breaks your heart just so much. I mean, how did you feel when Fitz, first, the way he meets Patience couldn't be any more Fitz if anybody had tried. What are your feelings?
So like you said, like Fitz needs a mother. Well, not needs him. Well, he needs a maternal figure.
Yeah.
He didn't have a mother. He doesn't remember his mother. Patience wanted a child, and they have it in each other, but they don't know how to pursue it. Similar to the way Burrich has never been a father himself, Patience has never been a mother. How does she mother? So she's mothering the best way that she knows how. And with this acknowledgement, but can't really acknowledge, she's doing the best that she can with what she has, and the tools that she has. And in a way, I feel like she's honoring chivalry by acknowledging Fitz as much as she can. As much as I think she wants to connect with Fitz, I feel like she, more than anything, wants to honor chivalry by trying to connect with Fitz. But yeah, I my memory is very hazy. So you might have to remind me when the scene when they do meet. I think it was in the like the garden area, is that right?
The first time that they meet, he's in the kitchens. He's been out. He's cold. He's been drinking, and he sort of just comes in and wants food. And here's this very fancy lady in the kitchen eating, and so he just feels very boorish. And he's like,
"That's okay." That's. I don't know why I was thinking it was in the woods.
Because that is the second meeting. Is when they're in the gardens. So,
it's all combining in my head.
Yeah.
But yeah, so no, it's again, probably projecting here. What's the theme of this video? Projection. When you're drinking, when you're drunk, your inhibitions are lowered. See my Persuasion video for alcoholic content. But all joking aside, your inhibitions are lowered, and Fitz doesn't have to be so aware of himself, aware of everything going on around him. He's able to be more honest about everything. So he's able to, and by not knowing Patience is Patience, there is no expectation or no preconceived notions of her.
Yeah.
Preconceived notions, like the other way though, there definitely is, because she knows who he is.
Yeah.
So I thought it was very interesting.
I mean, that it's clear quite quickly that the secrets at this point that Fitz has to keep in his life, to keep certain facets of his life separate, have really started to impact the relationships that he does have, and he doesn't have very many. So when he has to limit how much he can share within those relationships, that has a great deal and to do with, you know, how much they can and can't flourish. And there is a point in one of, quite early in Royal Assassin, when he's been on his big mission, he's come back, it hasn't gone particularly well, and he makes quite a blatant lie to Patience about how the trip went for him. And there's this understanding in that moment between them that she knows that he's lying, and he knows that she knows he's lying, and they both recognize the necessity for it. And I think for me, that was quite a defining moment between the two of them, where Patience saw him as an adult with many of the same burdens that she'd had to deal with in her husband. And Fitz finally saw Patience as something other than this completely bonkers woman who just never seems to have a grasp on the importance of things. And that paradigm shift, I think, made their relationship in Royal Assassin quite a beautiful thing. I mean, how did you see the change in that relationship in Royal Assassin? Was that something that you picked up on? Was that something that you noticed?
Not really, to be quite honest. The only time that I realized their relationship, and maybe this was, you know, Fitz realizing it as well, is when at the end of Royal Assassin, or really the beginning of Assassin's Quest, when he's realizing the impact of his, can I say it?
Yeah.
Can you spoil it like this? When he dies and he no longer can exist as Fitz. So, and then they have the Patience has the funeral for him. She is the one to take his body and say, no, you are not going to burn this body. We're going to bury it. Mm. You're not going to desecrate his body. And it's, as someone who was raised in a Judeo-Christian religion, it's very, if not outright religious, it is very spiritual in that moment. Mm. And
because she also shows such profound respect for his body, and that she does cleanse him, and she does truly care for his body, and leaves it in such a way that will allow the story to continue, where in having that love and care for his person, it was the only way she could show the depth of her feeling, even as it made her even more of an outcast to the people around her in Buckkeep Castle.
And at the same time, the absolute gut-wrenching realization for probably both Fitz and Patience is that she could only show her true feelings for Fitz in his death.
Yeah.
She couldn't do it when he was alive.
Yeah. And I mean, this is where Robin Hall as an author absolutely shines, because so much of this is picked up through context. I mean, this is never overtly stated anywhere in the books, and yet I am 100% certain this is completely factual and completely canon and can be found in the text if you look. But it's never overtly stated. And that relationship that Patience and Fitz had in literally just those first two books, so like a book and a half, that's a relationship that has profoundly impacted Fitz. Because of
and
everybody.
On top of that, and I was going to say, on top of that, not only, you know, across two books, but in a handful of scenes maybe across those two books.
Oh yeah. And that's but that's another, it's a testament to Robin Hobb, and it's one of the things that are always stated about her, is her ability to build these relationships between characters and being able to build such three-dimensional secondary characters from that first person POV. And we got so much of how Patience thinks and feels and interacts with Fitz, and that really informed to quite a strong degree his relationship that he forms with Kettricken. Because he's had that interaction with Patience, he's able to see Kettricken as more than just her role. He's able to see her as an individual and sees her for what she is. And that's a relationship that is just beautiful. There's a genuine friendship that forms between Fitz and Kettricken, regardless of the forces within the court that kind of force them together quite often. I mean, I know that you love Kettricken as a character. I mean, where do you see the relationship between she and Fitz? I mean, what are the pillars of that do you think?
Yeah, so she, regardless of her relationship with Fitz, or really her relationships with anyone, there's no pretense with Kettricken. And that's one of the many things I love about her. She is a royal. She is part of the royal family in the Mountain Kingdom. But as I know we're talking about Fitz, but I could go on for hours about Kettricken and herself as a sacrifice and what all that means for her, not only as a character, but in the story, in the trilogy. Oh God, I love her so much.
I am in the heart of her story at the moment, toward the end of Assassin's, because I'm obviously in another reread, and I'm almost at the end of Assassin's Quest, where we are getting such rich Kettricken content, and the truly profound feelings that she has around her duty as sacrifice, which is how her own people name her rather than princess, and that her understanding of the word sacrifice and what that means to not just her, but her people. And I think that in the sense of the quest, of Assassin's Quest, in a very traditional sense of the word, Fitz has learned throughout that quest about how he feels about the people of his country. And I think by the end of Assassin's Quest, they've both come to quite a similar place where sacrifice, this is their job. This is their purpose. And I think that since Fitz had discovered that before this entire quest, or rather the final part of that quest, the friendship between them is able to become even deeper, because they do both understand that this is necessary. This is, whatever this costs us, this is what has to happen. And
well, even before that, Fitz kills Kettricken's brother. So
true. Yeah,
she could resent him for that. But as the same
to
way,
be fair, he doesn't actually.
True.
But he is seen as being guilty. Yes.
And he is intimately involved with that, and she could resent him for that. Because if he was not involved, her brother would still be alive. And her people would not be in such a precarious situation, or at least not as precarious. And I think her acknowledging and knowing and understanding, like you said, the sacrifice that not only she would have to make, but her people, that extends to her brother as well. So her brother sacrificed, so she needs to step up and really take on this role. And she could resent Fitz for all of this, but she really just takes him, like connects with him more because of it.
Yeah, no, I do actually think that. I think that she sees him very similarly, in that he is put in these positions and is expendable. And I think she sees his sacrifice as being expendable. There's an honesty to Kettricken that is so amazing. There's a purity to that honesty. She is never going to be false to herself. And I think of all of the human people that Fitz interacts with, I think that she is possibly the only person that knows every aspect of Fitz and that he genuinely trusts. At the same time as not trusting her role. He knows that she will have to do things as sacrifice, as queen, that could bite him in the ass. But as a person, that she would never abuse his trust. And I think that that dichotomy is such a profound part of their relationship, that they both are aware that they are themselves, that they're friends and they love each other, and this is a really strong bond. And they also are their positions, where as that position have to do certain things that could cost each other as individuals. And they both understand that. And almost nobody else allows Fitz to separate those two.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's a beautiful relationship. But now we get into the best part. The very most important relationship that Fitz has really in his life, which is the one that he forms with Nighteyes. And Nighteyes is, I mean, for the amount of internal connection the two of them share, he is still his own person, Nighteyes. And yes, I know he's a wolf. He's still a person. I have always sort of felt that the magics, the wit and the skill, both of which Fitz has, found them for each other. When they meet, Cub is in a cage in the market. He's angry, he's frustrated, he feels powerless. Fitz is walking through the market. He's angry, he's frustrated, he feels powerless. And those emotions, I'm so certain, connected before they even met each other. Their connection, I'm so certain, formed before they were even in the same space as each other. I mean, how do you see the way that bond formed? I mean, did you immediately go, yes, this is the thing?
Well, so I was always led to have an expectation of their relationship. But I was still reeling from the roller coaster of emotions with Nosy. Even to this day, Assassin's Apprentice, if I had to choose a favorite, it is my favorite of the entire bunch. And not only like started out the entire journey in the realm of the Elderlings, but that Fitz's relationship with Nosy was so integral to this story, and it truly was a bookend of Nosy was at the start, Nosy was at the end. And so I struggled to connect with Nighteyes, even through Fitz. And it was only until the end of Royal Assassin and the start of Assassin's Quest when Fitz loses himself, for lack of a better term, with his death, and Nighteyes is the one to truly hold him together, and they have that opportunity to just become one with each other.
Yep.
But then Burrich calls him back, and him saying, oh God, okay, can't even.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's fine, don't worry. And then, in Assassin's Quest, which a lot of people don't like Assassin's Quest because it's long and it's slow, and I'm like, it's a quest, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
But also, like, it's Fitz and Nighteyes are finding themselves together. They truly become, Fitz becomes more wolf-like and Nighteyes becomes more human. But then when they're at this like peak and at this cusp of connection, it's cut off, and they both truly have to find their identities without any crutches.
Yes.
With either of themselves as a crutch. And and that, I think that's when I truly started to appreciate Nighteyes, that he has this ability to disconnect from Fitz, and he makes this choice to reconnect with him, even though he knows, like, yeah, I should be a wolf. I should go find a pack and have my own, cubs and stuff like that. But he wants to come back to Fitz.
Mm.
And that's when I truly, like, started to really appreciate Nighteyes.
Yeah, that's a key moment for Nighteyes, that time that he spends away. In that, I think that's when Nighteyes realizes how human he has become, because he comes back and says, I missed talking about thoughts. And then he talks about wanting a word to talk about thoughts and how human that is. Because why would you need a name for something that isn't real?
Yeah.
And they've both learned that they're missing something fundamental without the other. And how much of that is a general response to our wit bond, and how much of that is a response to the time they spent sharing Nighteyes' body, where they coexisted to the point that when Fitz did return to his body, was it just Fitz that returned to his body? Or was it merely half of a whole? And I have felt that, yes, that's what's happened, that it's half of a whole rather than Fitz has left Nighteyes. And that will play out later, and there will be things that strengthen that in other readers to discover for themselves. But it definitely informs the way that Fitz is in Assassin's Quest. And when they travel through the mountains, we then see how his relationships with do you know what we haven't done? We haven't talked about the Fool.
That's why I was like, Nighteyes, the best one?
Well, the most intimate. They say, I mean, nobody knows him better than Nighteyes. So we have to go back a very long way for when he first met Fool. And we first met Fool way back in Assassin's Apprentice in the garden with a very kind of confusing riddle almost about Feist's Fitz. And you're just like, what? So I'm glad I'm not the only. Even now reading that, I'm like, as your first meeting with somebody, you'd be thinking they're insane. Okay, let's get you back to your room.
Well, he's a jester.
Yeah.
He is the court jester. He dresses like a jester. He's got all the bells and all the whistles, literally and figuratively, of a jester. And while at the same time you're like, what? It makes sense. It's not something totally outside of the norm. The thing that is interesting and intriguing and fascinating is why Fitz? why is the Fool connecting with Fitz
Mm.
in the way that he is? And why is he pursuing Fitz? Because he really is pursuing him.
Yeah, yes. And it takes a long time for that relationship to start being explained. Yet there is definitely a relationship there. You learn very quickly that Fitz is one of the only people who not only tolerates Fool, but actually is quite happy to interact with him. Will look him in the eyes, treats him like a person, where the Fool is treated as a sort of freak by the rest of the castle. I've often heard people say they don't see the friendship between Fitz and the Fool. And I kind of get that. It's not like a lot of things in Hob. A lot of it is context. A lot of it you pick up through the things you don't notice that you're noticing. And so they don't actually have very many friendly interactions on page. Their interactions are usually very tense. They're very fraught. Fool is often mocking Fitz. And so you never see the quiet, actually we're friends hanging out moments. But I never felt the lack of those. And yet I know other readers did. I mean, did you believe that friendship from very early on?
Yeah, it felt to me like playground friendship. The teasing and the just, well, mockery going on, where the Fool was being, the poking Fitz, of bothering him and nudging him and being a pain in Fitz's ass. And Fitz is just the stoic one of just like, okay. But he notices him. And they're both at that kind of that in between. The Fool also he's neither lowborn, nor is he a royal. He's not a bastard in any way, but he's neither. He has no place. He has no status, and he plays whatever role he needs to play to be able to have connections with people. And he is what other people need him to be, and he is what Fitz needs him to be, I think, at least initially. And as their relationship grows over the course of Farseer, not only is the Fool able to be not necessarily more of himself, but he's able to realize that he doesn't have to play a part for Fitz.
Yeah.
And as they both grow, they're both kind of one's going up a little bit, one's catching up, one's going ahead, and they're both kind of catching each other in a way, or trying to catch up to one another. If that makes sense.
It does, because they're both at these stages of maturity that neither of them feel quite adult, and yet both of them are moving away from childhood, and they're just progressing at a different rate to each other. So there is this, as you say, one feels slightly more mature than the other, and then the other one, and that friendship goes as well.
Yeah, the Fool even says, I'm paraphrasing here, that he's very young, like mentally, for himself, even though he is mature.
Yeah.
And you see that, not necessarily immaturity, but you see his innocence truly when Shrewd dies.
Yeah.
He's absolutely devastated. Like, there's no facade. It's completely stripped bare when Shrewd dies, because that's the identity that he had. That's the connection that he had. And other than Fitz, I think Shrewd is the only one that saw him in any significant way. And that was a heartbreaking scene for me.
And Phil, excuse me, Phil also states this was the first time I'd felt safe. And that's something Fitz can relate to, is safety being rare. And that's another point that draws them together. I mean, as far as their friendship, Fitz and the Fool as young boys, young men, that's one side of their relationship. And the other side is, as we learn as the books progress, is their relationships as the prophet and the catalyst. And it takes Fitz a long time to accept that that is part of their relationship. And we see the beginning of a dynamic that will continue between them for a long time of denying facets of each other, where they both trust their friendship, but they're both also quite resistant to learning about facets of the other one that don't fit that friendship. How do you feel that that sort of limits the way they deal with each other? I mean, is that something that you noticed or picked up on? Or
yeah, I feel like specifically with the kind of the White Prophet and the Catalyst, Fitz keeping it to Farseer. That's the only thing that's holding him back from a true and utter connection with the Fool. Because I feel like Fitz, when he's reminded of the whole White Prophet Catalyst thing, there's this feeling that I get that Fitz sees the Fool and their connection as the Fool only wants to be his friend because of he is the White Prophet and he is the Catalyst. So there's this again projecting this idea and this thought of, well, does he like me for me? Like, does he even like me? Does he only tolerate me for lack of a better term, because of this thing, because of this prophecy? If he didn't have the prophecy, would he still want to be my friend?
That's right.
So
I mean, it goes back to what I was saying about the way Fitz is. Well, what does this person want from me? Can I trust their motivations? And almost heartbreakingly, quite often he's right, that people do only want to have any connection to him because of his position, because of where he stands within the Farseers, rather than for himself. It is a huge part of the way he deals with the world. And so if we come back to the final questing stage of Assassin's Quest, where we've got this very small group of people who at this point don't need anything from each other than companionship to get to their destination. The acceptance within that group of everybody else in that group gives both Fitz and Nighteyes an experience they've never had before, and that of being welcome, that of being part of a group, of a social group. And that I always feel heals something in Fitz, having that time where he's part of a traveling group who know who he is, who know he's witted, who accept that he's witted, and as an extension of that, accept Nighteyes into the group as well. I mean, that's one of my favourite sections of all of the Elderlings, is that travelling portion. I mean, again, you said it earlier, people find the questing in Assassin's Quest boring. How did you feel when they formed that small band and headed into the cold? Where were you with that?
I'm going to not answer your question right now.
No,
but I'm
fine.
going to say, I'm going to go back. So everything that happened plot-wise, not only to Fitz, but to everyone else,
yep,
leads up to that point.
Yeah.
leads up to the quest to find Verity. And stripping away, well, before that, Fitz being stripped away of all his crutches, he's able to find himself and find his footing on his own. So that on this quest with these other people and being reunited with Nighteyes, and the Fool and Kettricken, he's able to form a better intimacy with everyone.
Yeah.
Everything is stripped away. Like they're not in Buckkeep Castle. They're not in any sort of political turmoil thing. Their society is gone. It's just them. And so they have to create their own like miniature society in a way. But by limiting the number of people that they have around them and with each other, they're able to form that intimacy. Whether they like the other people or not, darling.
Yeah.
So, and it's really, it's formative for everybody, having that intimacy.
Yeah, it is. And I enjoy, I mean, obviously it's very fresh for me right now. That is the section I'm in Assassin's Quest at the moment. So it's very on the top of my mind. And watching the relationships form almost through Fitz. I mean, not in a specific way, but where we have Nighteyes building a relationship with Kettricken. And we have the Fool building a relationship with Kettricken. And we have Kettle building a relationship with the Fool. And all of these relationships are only possible because of Fitz's inclusion in this group. And some of those friendships are just some of the most magical friendships. They really are. How did you, because we're seeing them, as you say, very stripped of artifice, this is who they are, at the soul level, that there's no reason to put on a front. How did you feel that was sort of portrayed as they traveled? I mean, did it feel, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a plot convenience, or did it actually feel like, yes, this is how it would go?
The only character that felt a little bit unnatural, I guess, was Kettle.
Okay.
But with that said, I shouldn't say you. Generally, I think you as a reader develop that relationship with Kettle and understand, regardless of whether her inclusion felt natural or not at the beginning of the quest, her integrity, sorry if you hear my dog barking,
That's okay.
The importance of her as a character within the story and on the quest itself feels so natural and necessary. By the end of it. Yeah,
because she's certainly a trope. The mysterious traveler is certainly a trope in a quest book. So I don't know. I mean, can you call it a plot convenience? I don't know that you can, but I've certainly seen people sort of say that was convenient. Well, kind of.
I think if anything is convenient is the Farseer felt very much wrapped up. I think, I genuinely, knowing that Realm of the Elderlings was, is 16 books long or whatever, once I got to the end of Assassin's Quest and I finished the Farseer trilogy, I'm like, where does it go from here? What more is there? And that there is more, and it doesn't feel forced is amazing. But it's Robin Hobb, so
yeah. It's
And
unusual though that you say that, because it's a common complaint that I've encountered. Excuse me, where people have said that the ending feels very rushed, and a lot of the themes aren't completed. They don't come to fruition, and obviously that wasn't a feeling for you. I mean, how did you feel with the way that the red ships specifically sort of wrapped up? I mean, obviously you didn't have a problem with the way that ended, but
yeah, I think the important stuff was wrapped up, so it made the red ships not necessarily. I felt like they were addressed. Like, it was important for the development of the plot and of Fitz's character. Okay. So that's why I felt satisfied.
Fair enough. Yeah. Because it does kind of, and this is how I have sort of said to people in the past, you don't get that big confrontation with the Red Ship Raiders because Fitz isn't there. And this is Fitz's story. And Fitz's story doesn't include that. So you do get it from Fitz's POV as hearing about what happened. We do get quite a nice sort of drifting off of the story as it talks about sort of briefly as to what he did after everybody sort of scattered from that final point at the heart of the quest. I felt that to be quite a lovely way to end the story, because, as you say, it does feel quite complete. Was there anything that you felt you would have really liked Robin Hobb to spend more time on, given that Assassin's Quest is 1,007 pages? I mean, Assassin's Quest itself is, 838 pages. What else did she need to put in there? Or what do you think she could have removed?
Well, the only thing that felt remotely convenient, that still, like, in hindsight, I get why she put it in there, but it still felt out of place. Like, it took me out of the story for a hot minute. Was in Assassin's Apprentice when Fitz goes to the Forge place. I think they call it Forge.
That's why it's called Forge.
They call it Forge because they wanted to call it Forge.
First.
I think I don't think we were sending voice messages at that point, but I was talking to Jake, and I'm like, this feels like, I think this feels like, I told him, whoever I was talking to, I said, literally, it felt like a side quest.
Okay. When he was in the skill training, when he got sent to Forge.
Yeah, so when he was sent to Forge by
Galen.
By Shade's Lady Time.
Oh, the first time he went to, when it was the very first invasion of Forge. Okay. Yep. I think, I don't know necessarily that it was a plot convenience as such. I mean, actually, I say that out loud. Yeah, I suppose it was, because how else to tell you what this process resulted in? What were these forged ones? And perhaps that's something that is part of how people feel that it didn't end, the trilogy didn't end tying up all of these loose ends, because it doesn't address the forged ones, even though they have been a significant part of the trilogy to this point. I mean, because my argument is it's important. They are important to the story, and yet it wasn't addressed at the end. So how important could they be?
For me, so just generally speaking, there are exceptions to every rule. But for me, I don't need every single thing, every question answered. I just need to be satisfied. And I was satisfied with Farseer and the way that it ended.
No,
and
fair enough.
everything from the start, beginning, and everything in between. I was satisfied. And I think that's just because I trusted Robin Hobb as a writer, and anything that was important that I need to know. And then going forward, like into the other series, like I've heard a lot of people like, oh, I need to reread, like I need a summary of whatever happened before. And it's like, well, if I need to know information, I will find out that information, the relevant information.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, there you go. Robin Hobb gives us that information as we need. And not even in last week's episode. It's very, very smoothly, very seamlessly provided to you. Not like all of her plots are done that way, regardless of whether it is providing information that you need from previous books or just even providing information at all. Like I trust Robin Hobb to take me on a journey, and to tell me not only a story, but also to just have an experience. Going back to Fitz and people seeing him as depressing is something that I've found with Robin Hobb's writing in general, as well as Fitz as a character. He and his experiences, however good, bad, in between, it is cathartic in the best way to be with his character. And through that catharsis, I am able to love him more.
Yeah, I will definitely agree with that. I mean, I read it in isolation for many years because BookTube wasn't a thing. And it was only when I found BookTube that I encountered this sense that Farseer was depressing and he was such a troubled soul, and look how broken Fitz is. And to me, because I suffer, true. Well, it is true, but because I'm broken in many of the same ways, I didn't notice it because he felt normal to me. His reactions were completely normal. They were completely believable. And this is something that Robin Hobb does exceptionally well. She has a grasp of what impacts somebody's personality and how that affects choices, and how a situation can form a person into somebody who reacts certain ways. So only with other people's input have I been able to see this from different angles. And this is why having these discussions has been so incredible for me as a reader to get even more from these books. I mean, how have you found the experience with reading with a group? Because, I mean, we're part of a Voxer group that talks about them as everybody's going through. We're part of multiple threads with Hobb readers where we all do talk about the books as we go through. Do you think that it takes away from that immersion, that enjoyable experience, or do you think that it is something that everybody should try and do and read it with somebody else?
Well, so I'm kind of I've got my one foot on either side of the state lines here, in that I have read each book on my own, but have shared my thoughts with other people that have read them in the past or are reading them, but we're not quite up, reading at the same time. So I'm able to, again, generally, I seem to have a deeper connection with reading novels without any expectations or preconceived notions, which is why reading Assassin's Apprentice with all the hype around it was that I was able to connect with it so deeply was surprising, genuinely surprising to me. And that I've since, I've been able to connect so deeply with the writing and the characters, because I have that one-on-one relationship with them. I mean,
it's totally a thing.
Yeah. So because you mentioned it before about how Fitz doesn't have, the friends to tell him, hey, what you're feeling is normal or not normal. Fitz, as a reader, I feel like Fitz is that for me. He, again, in that catharsis, it's like, oh, I feel validated in Fitz.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
It is, and that touches on what I was saying, in that Robin Hobb really has a grasp of how people experience events, and all of the characters in Farseer feel very real, and it bothers me a little to use realistic realism in any discussion around fantasy. The whole point is that it's fantasy.
Yeah.
But it's very reliant on a certain level of realism, of something relatable. And her characters are, because their feelings are real. And because their feelings are real, and because she's given you these characters that are real enough to be believable, their emotions hook into yours. And I have said in the past that Robin Hobb just punches a hole in my chest, grips my heart in her fist, and then punches me in the soul with it, because it hits on quite a profound level emotionally. I go through a lot of tissues when I read Robin Hobb. I was bawling my eyes out last night. I was doing a jigsaw. I had to just sit for a minute with my hands over my face and just rock while I sobbed, because it was just so emotional. And yet somehow there are people who don't cry in Farseer, who aren't hit quite so profoundly. So those connections are formed in different ways with the reader, and Hobb is skilled enough that there are connections for the reader with multiple characters. If you don't connect with one, you're likely to connect with another, because she's written them so real. They're full
There's
people.
a complexity there. Yeah. And I mean, to kind of step away from Farseer and Robin Hobb, I would actually challenge you that fantasy, any sort of genre fiction, is often looked down upon as not being realistic and not being real. And I don't want to look down upon or demean like literary fiction in any way, but genre fiction can be often more realistic than anything that's not fantasy, not sci-fi, because writers are able to really get to the crux of the issue that they want to explore, or the character that they want to portray, without these guardrails of reality to work with. So anyways, but going back to Robin, yeah. So, but going back to Robin Hobb and to Farseer, like, I mean, I've cried on the internet before, so it's fine. You don't have to edit this out. Just reflecting on Fitz and on the Farseer trilogy as a whole, and don't get me started on Kettricken. we
can talk about Kettricken on another day because
it's
a big topic, and we can do that.
We need a whole, like, just one scene we just need to talk about for an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just I don't even know where I was going with that thought. Yeah, it's
final thoughts.
Yeah, it's Robin Hobb that fits in the Farseer trilogy. Whether you like him or not, I think there should be, hopefully, an appreciation and a compassion for him.
Yeah.
You can have compassion for someone and not like them.
Yeah, absolutely. I do agree with that. So I think with that, we've been going a fair amount of time. So, I mean, is there any sort of, for new readers, what would you say to new readers coming into Farseer? What do they need to know?
Don't be intimidated. Like, don't be intimidated by the hype. I would say just just trust Hobb. And that's not to say that, oh, if you just trust her, you're gonna love it. Just like with anything, like not every reader is gonna love, not every book is gonna be for every reader, and vice versa. So I at least give Assassin's Apprentice a try. If that hooks you, then yeah.
Yeah, it's the beginning of a journey, that's for sure.
Yep.
Alrighty. Well, with that, I'm going to thank the lovely Evie for joining us for this discussion. And if you enjoyed it, please press like and consider subscribing. Hopefully Evie will join us again for further discussion, probably around Kettricken. With that, I'm going to love you and leave you. Have a great week.